Here are the stories of 5 great Scottish innovators. Now, I'm not actually a fiercely patriotic Scot. I don't deep fry my chocolate bars or support whichever football team England's playing, but I am proud of Scotland's innovative heritage and how it shaped our world. We'll start with Alexander Wood. He was a doctor, and he was the son of a doctor and a doctor's cousin. Now, that's only just legal, I believe. He lived in Edinburgh, and he wanted to find a better way of applying morphine and opium, or smack to you and me, subcutaneously. So, taking inspiration from the bumblebee in 1853, he came up with the hypodermic syringe. It was years before it was used for anything other than narcotics, and nearly 150 years before the birthplace of hypodermic drug taking was immortalised in celluloid. The story goes that the first fatality from intravenous morphine addiction was actually Alexander's wife. Oh, the irony. So what can we learn from the father of the smackheads? Well, we can learn from nature. It's been developing and testing solutions for millions of years, and if the stuff didn't work, natural selection would have weeded it out along the way. Thank you, Mother Nature. Here's Alexander Fleming. He was doing some research on the Staphylococcus bacteria at Imperial College London in the late 20s when he made a bit of a careless mistake.
Oh, bugger.
He left a petri dish containing a culture of the stuff open, and it had got infected with mould. It was ruined. Most people would simply have thrown it away, but not our hero. He noticed that there was a little gap between the bacteria he was trying to grow and this lump of blue-green mould that had infected it. And he started wondering, why was there a gap? His research led to him discovering the antibiotic properties of the penicillium mould, which is the same stuff that you find in your fancy cheeses.
Yum.
Syphilis patients around the world rejoiced, people with gangrenous open sores were high-fiving each other in the streets, and medicine took a giant leap forward. So what can we learn from Alexander Fleming? He noticed something that would pass by most people, and that's the secret of innovation, is to notice things that most people miss, and ask lots of questions. Don't make any assumptions. And here's Robert Watson Watt. He came from good innovative stock. He was a descendant of James Watt, the inventor of the steam engine. And having the decidedly silly name of Watson Watt, he realised he should be in the War Office. That would mean that he could be surrounded by people called Binky Jones and Ginger, and his name wouldn't seem quite so silly. But nothing was available for him there, so he joined the Meteorological Office instead. Now, they were interested in his ideas of using radio to detect thunderstorms. That would make things a bit safer for pilots, and he successfully created a system that could tell the direction of the offending dark clouds and lightning, and then plot them on a screen that goes bleep. Just before World War II, the Air Ministry were worried that Nazi Germany were building a death ray powerful enough to wipe out entire cities, so they asked Robert if he could build one for King and Country. He did a study and concluded that the whole thing was a myth and was totally impossible. And then he added a little bit at the end, saying that maybe his thunderstorm detector could also detect planes. Now, that wasn't as sexy as a death ray, but they funded it anyway. And it was a great success, and it's credited with making the war much shorter than it could have been. After the whole bally mess of warfare was over, he moved to Canada, and he was mightily miffed when he got caught for speeding there and discovered that his radar technology was how they had caught him. So he wrote a poem about it. Pity Sir Robert Watson Watt, strange target of this radar plot, and thus, with others I can mention, the victim of his own invention. His magical all-seeing eye enabled cloud-bound planes to fly, but now, by some ironic twist, it spots the speeding motorist and bites, no doubt with legal wit, the hand that once created it. So what can Sir Robert Watson Watt teach us? Well, it may be that an existing innovation can solve more than one problem. What else can you use it for? It may be something that's more important than the reason it was created in the first place. Here's James Young Simpson. He was born in 1811, the youngest of 7 children, and he was a bit of an overachiever. He went to the University of Edinburgh when he was just 14, and he graduated when he was 18. But he was too young to practice medicine, and he had to wait another 2 years to get a license to actually practice as a doctor. By 28, he was the chair of medicine and midwifery at the university. And maybe just to goad the older doctors and professors, he added the young bit into his name because that's not what's on his birth certificate. He's just plain old James Simpson. He had a townhouse in Edinburgh, and he preferred to keep his wife and family at a country house well outside the city, and that let him live it up in Edinburgh. He serviced the gynecological needs of society women, and he had very regular dinner parties there. Most nights he also experimented with the anaesthetic properties of different chemicals, along with a couple of doctor friends. One night they decided to inhale chloroform. It resulted in what they report as a general mood of cheer and humour, and then all three of them promptly passed out on the floor. When they awoke the next morning, James realised that this stuff might just do the job, and he proposed it for use as an anaesthetic in childbirth, which resulted in a fight against the church, who believed that the pain of childbirth was a curse from God and that women had to be made to suffer it. But James persisted and, hallelujah, won his case. When he died, his family left his party pad to the church, and most ironically, these days it's an advice centre for people with drug problems. So what can we learn from James Young Simpson and his experimental drug taking? Well, he may have got the credit for discovering the powers of chloroform, but he didn't do it alone. It's a good idea to surround yourself with people who support your vision. And finally, we have William Gedd, who was a goldsmith in Edinburgh in the early 1700s. He had a pretty good business. He made quite a lot of money, and he got involved in investing that money in other businesses by lending it to them. And it's this lending of money for printing that got him interested in that profession. At the time, all the type for printing had to be imported from London. That's all the individual letters. And that clearly stuck in the guts of Scottish printers. This got into William's head, and he started to think about the inefficiencies of printing. In these days, if you were reprinting a book, you had to reset all the type for the entire book again. I mean, what a pain in the arse. So William came up with the idea of creating a stereotype, or a second copy of the set type, that could be used again. This involved making a plaster cast of the set page, and then using that to create a lead copy. And this slab of lead you could then store to use again, much in the same way as you save a document in Microsoft Word. What a great idea. So he went into business with an Edinburgh printer to make the idea happen. But that printer let him down 2 years later. He then got an offer of trying it out in London, so he moved south. And a couple of years later he was let down again. So after being given the runaround by even more people, he ended up as the printer for the University of Cambridge. But his letter founder there was fearful of how much his invention would disrupt the trade. So he sabotaged the efforts by supplying substandard type and by smacking the type around with a hammer when no one was looking. So penniless and dejected, William returned to Scotland. Fortunately, he had good friends in Edinburgh, and on his return they raised enough money for him to prove his art on a single book from a Roman historian. And then he died. And about 100 years after he died, his invention revolutionised the printing trade. So what can we learn from poor old William Gedd? Well, too many people take no for an answer. If you have a vision, you have to follow it. A failure isn't the end. And from this story, it looks like death isn't either. However, when it comes to this talk, this actually is the end. Thanks for listening. Goodbye.